How much has the Volkswagen Jetta improved in 45 years? That's what we're going to find out today, because next to me is a beautiful, fully restored, all original Jetta from 1982 next to the all-new refreshed 2025 Jetta. Let's see what's changed. The design of the Volkswagen Jetta is definitely handsome, if not very progressive or round. This car is the definition of a three-box design, and what I mean by that is there's a box where the engine is, there's a box where the people sit, and there's a box where the luggage goes. But this design has aged incredibly well. I don't think you can go wrong with making a square car. Square is cool. Square will never not be cool. Think about the Bronco, the Wrangler, right? The reason that those designs last not only years, but decades is because everybody loves a good square. And the first gen Jetta is definitely a good square. Now this car is very nicely restored by Volkswagen. And I remember even as a kid, I would see these around all the time. And I'm talking like the early 2000s when these cars were some 20 years old. But even since then, they just have simply disappeared off the road, either due to rust or due to lack of maintenance or due to collisions. These cars were not cars that were collected, right? They were just affordable runarounds that people used to go to college and have kids in and make kids in, and then kind of got thrown away and tossed to the side. Now, some of the design highlights. This does have the quad seal beam headlights, which is an iconic look through the 1980s here in the US. Depending on where you were abroad, you might have a different front end design, but this was pretty much a staple for American Volkswagens. We have this large crash bumper here, which is ready to be bumped into parking lots and into Back to the Future movies in the 1980s. It was very durable. And then, of course, you had your little turn signal down below. And I do like the front lower splitter, even though this isn't like a GTI or GLI or what may have been a performance Volkswagen back in the day. It still does have that lower front splitter, which looks really cool. And then the wheels, man, these wheels are so vintage, retro, and fantastic. And they are just 13 inches in diameter, 13s. Now wrapped in a Hankook tire, a little bit of a black fender flare as well, with the rub strip down the side. This was a feature of old cars, which needs to come back. You could open your door in parking lots into other cars, or other cars could open their door into you and not sustain as much damage as you might on a modern car, which is pretty cool. Look at how thin the A-pillars were, right? So much of the experience of driving these older cars is that crazy visibility. Look at the size of the windows. Not only do you have this really low belt line, you got a pretty tall roof, which makes it just have this fishbowl effect, which, you know, is not a trendy look nowadays, but made them super nice to drive in urban environments. And then large quarter windows or smoking windows or vent windows, depending on what you want to say, which you can kind of crack open and get some fresh airflow in. We'll make our way down the side. Unleaded gasoline only with the key. Of course, this car, being designed in the late 1970s, was very much designed in that fuel crisis era. So being able to lock away your fuel, very important. And then the tail light, simple, blocky, match the rest of the exterior design. You got those impact bumpers and then a single exhaust poking out the back. So a handsome car overall. I have a lot of fondness for this design, and it's just beautiful in a simple, elegant kind of way. All right, now for the brand new, refreshed 2025 Jetta. This is the reason Volkswagen flew me out to Ann Arbor to check this car out. And Volkswagen has done a bunch to improve the Jetta for the 2025 model year. Now, this is the 7th generation of Jetta, which made its debut in January of 2018 at the North American International Auto Show. But it's seen a bunch of changes in those 7 years now. And for 2025, this car has been heavily redone. So the front end is much more aggressive, almost Audi-like, and I love these new tapered headlights that make their way to that brand new Volkswagen logo, which is a little different than what we saw on that 1982 car. And of course, grills in general have gotten quite a bit bigger. So this front end is now an air intake, and you can actually see there are some active grille shutters in there that can open and close to improve the aerodynamics and fuel economy. But it's not an obnoxious style grille like some of its competition. I actually think Volkswagen has done a pretty good job of integrating the front end of this car. Now, wheels. So that old Jetta had 13s. This SCL on this new one has these monster 18-inch wheels with 4-corner ABS disc brakes, obviously, which is a nice improvement. And then as we make our way along the side, still a little bit of chrome, which was all the rage back in the 70s and the 80s, across the belt line. And then the rear, of course, much larger, much more Audi-like as well. But look, I actually think that the car has remained pretty handsome. All cars look different than they did back in 1982, but if you compare this car to its competitors, vehicles like the Hyundai Elantra, the Toyota Corolla, Mazda 3, it's a good-looking car, and Nissan Sentra, Volkswagen has done a good job of keeping the Jetta relevant, mainstream, but classy. Some cars like the Elantra are just a little weird for me. The Corolla is a little boring, but I think the Jetta is a classy look for 2025. It's kind of like the luxury option among the small sedans. It's pretty good. I'm not going to knock the styling. I think it's handsome. Now, engine and power in the Mark I Jetta would vary hugely based on where you were in the world. 4-cylinder making just 74 horsepower and 90 pound-feet of torque. There were a choice of manual or automatic transmissions. This one is the automatic, which I think was fairly common in the US, although a stick was still also very prevalent. Manual transmission take rates were much higher back in the day, but a simple, easy to work on engine. You know, you got your timing cover here, easily accessible. Nothing is hard to get to. You can see it's a transverse design. You can actually even see and get to that transaxle, which is just right there. It still uses a distributor style ignition system, very basic fuel injection setup. So look, we're not looking at a very sophisticated engine, 74 horsepower. It's not going to light the world on fire, only front wheel drive, no all-wheel drive configurations, but it did the job. And back in the day, these were fairly efficient and well-made cars. Now, when it comes to engines, the new Jetta has one option here in the US. Now, it still is a transverse 4-cylinder, still powers the front wheels through an automatic transmission, but this is a 1.5 liter instead of a 1.7. So the engine's actually got smaller in displacement over the years, but they've added a standard turbo and the power is way up. So the old car had 74, this one has more than double. We're looking at 158 horsepower and over 180 pound-feet of torque. And then this car has a standard 8-speed automatic transmission. The automatic transmission is now standard for 2024. So unlike the old car where you could get manuals and autos, the only way to get a stick in 2024 is in the GLI, which is a high-performance variant. And it's the last Volkswagen manual transmission ever made. Let that sink in for a sec, because it's gone now in the GTI and the Golf R. So the Jetta GLI is the last way to get the stick in the new Jetta. That is crazy, folks. Absolutely wild. But smooth transmission that we'll find out in a second. And fuel economy, we're looking at something like 33 mpg combined. So you might is a key word, have been able to eke out more with the 82 downhill with the tailwind, but I would wager if we put these cars side by side in an MPG loop with the aero improvements and the efficiency improvements of modern fuel injection, the new one would probably be better. All right, I gotta check out the inside of the Mark I Jetta. I love these door handles, by the way. The actual handle doesn't move. It's just an elegant little lever on the inside of the handle that glides that door open, and listen to the close. Oh, that is fantastic. Now you gotta remember, cars in the 1970s, American cars in the 1970s and through the 80s really struggled with quality problems. We're talking the era of the Pinto, of the Chevette. You know, especially small American cars were just, I'm gonna make a claim here, garbage. And then the Japanese and the Germans with cars like the Jetta came in and proved, look, you can have a small car that's still well made and is not gonna cost you 25-year salary. So let me show you around the interior of this Jetta. So first of all, door panel, 50 shades of brown. Brown is the color of the day. We've got brown, light brown on the uppers, light brown stitching, dark brown on the handle. We got a different brown on the seats, and then another dark brown on the dashboard with an even darker brown on the steering wheel. It is so unbelievably brown in there, but it's aged quite well. Once again, square, folks. All these companies making these swoopy cars nowadays, go back to building a square car. It's just a nice, elegant design. Now, the seats, of course, fully manual. We do have a headrest, so that is a nice little concession to safety, but that's about it. Although there are full 3-pointed seat belts, and I think they are the tensioning retractable kind. Yes, they sure are. And I do like the way that these little seatbelt holders work. So they plug in, and then there's a big old press button, but it's just a very 1980s looking design there. And let's go ahead and hop on in and check out some of the features on the inside of the Mark I Jetta. So steering wheel, plastic with that iconic 4-dot horn system that Volkswagen used in this decade. Clicking on those buttons, it feels so good and it looks so cool. The gauge cluster, about as simple as you get. So you've got a speedometer up to 85 miles an hour which was the mandate back in the day. So yes, the car could likely go well over 85, but this was the era of 55-mile-an-hour speed limits, and there was actually an FMVSS law, if I remember right, that said you couldn't implement a speedometer that went over 85 miles an hour, and then instead of a tack, you get this quartz clock, which looks great, and then some dummy lights in the middle. The key on the Jetta is going to be over here on the right side of the steering column, and you can see those dummy lights are going to come into life. For example, your battery light there, your turn signal light. It's just one little blinker. Left and right, you got one little blinker. Your high beam, same thing. And then you got a little temperature gauge down there with fuel to the right. Your light switch is going to be up here. And then your dimmer switch is going to be this little guy right there. Fasten seat belts. This is the era where folks were like, oh, we probably should start wearing some seat belts. And then over here, we're going to find button for hazards, or radio, which is AM, FM. You toggle it with this teeny, tiny button. Look how tiny that is to go between AM and FM. And then it's got just 2 speakers. So you got a speaker on the driver's side door, which is about the size of a modern day cell phone. Same thing on the driver's side. Oop, mix that up. You get it. Driver and passenger side. That's it. It does not sound good, but it did do the trick. It's amazing how small and delicate everything is. I mean, look at my pinky compared to some of these toggle switches. They are absolutely tiny, but functional. Everything works. We've got our fan control right there. AC, norm, bi-level, and heat. The sliders to change those different positions. A couple of air vents down here, on and off. An ashtray, because it was still seatbelt era, but still smoking era. And then I do love this big Jetta panel here. Shifter, this is some really cheap, chintzy plastic, but park, reverse, neutral drive. No center console, so no place to rest your elbow. It's going to have it floating. And then, check that out. We got one glove box and a second one. So pretty decent storage, along with a good-sized cubby beneath that shifter. Let's check out the warranty and maintenance guide for the 1982 vehicle. It was registered first in January of 83, and it's probably what, like a 90-day warranty, if I were to guess. I think that's what they were back in the day. Oh, free repair or replacement of defective parts for 12 months or 20,000 miles. I'm cutting this car short with my 90-day prediction. That's actually pretty darn good. And let's go ahead and check out the rear seat. So that's roughly my driving position, at 6 feet tall. And you better not have much in terms of legs if you want to get comfortable behind myself there. Simple bench seat, sort of got headrest back there. And then you have an ashtray. Oh yeah, but only the passenger side gets you an ashtray, so only that kid can smoke. So only one of your 2 kids is allowed to smoke in the back of the Mark I Jetta. All right, then let's check out the trunk. Now you use the key. Look how cool that key is, by the way. Stylized with Volkswagen. Now it's actually a lockable trunk. So if I turn it to the right, now I can't get in. If I turn it to the left, now this activates this little button. Pop that open. Look at the sheer size of that trunk. When you don't have safety structures to worry about, it's amazing how big you can make a trunk. You know, credit where it's due, the new car still has a very solid thunk. Listen to that. It really does feel like a quality item. And yes, this vehicle is manufactured in Puebla, Mexico, but, and I know that has a bad rap among some folks, but I'm really pretty shocked with the build quality. I mean, Volkswagen has been manufacturing Jettas there for decades and decades and decades now, and there may have been some truth on the early cars that the Puebla manufacturing was worse than the German manufacturing, but on the new one, folks, I mean, that is a high-end plant. I'm not sure that you can say that the German-made Volkswagens are any better than the ones made in Mexico at this point. They're really, really solid. But let's check out the inside of this new Jetta. So, gone is the brown, replaced in this case by black. It's now 50 shades of black and gray. I'm going to say something controversial. I kind of miss the brown. This is kind of a bit of a dark interior. I could use some more color contrast, and there are some interior colors available as well. But at least on this one, give me the tri-tone brown. Door panel, we do have this cool stitched leather with the white contrasting stitching, which looks pretty good. And the feature list on this car, pretty wild. I mean, leather seats, we've got power seats, memory seats, heated, ventilation, dual zone automatic climate control, 2 screens. The list goes on and on. But let's go ahead and fire this bad boy up. It's gone push button start. Key is not nearly as cool. It's fine, but it's no 82 key. And then, look at that. stitched leather steering wheel controls. Steering wheel feels nice in the hand. Still have physical buttons, still have physical knobs. Look, I know knobs are going away in 2024, but the Jetta still has them. And then down here we do have a touch panel, which is a little clunky, but you get used to it pretty quickly. The comfort in here. I mean, I know the car is going on 18, 20 inches longer than the old one, but it is so much more comfortable. It has a sound system by Beats, so we no longer have just 2 speakers. We have a real audio system with Apple CarPlay and everything you could ever want to integrate with that. It's a nice interior. We got a sunroof. I mean, this would have been a full-blown Cadillac from a feature standpoint, 40 years ago, and it has features a Cadillac would never have back then, like adaptive cruise control, like blind spot monitoring, like a plethora of airbags. So it's not fair to really compare these two from a feature standpoint, because the new car has quite a bit more. The back seat in the new Jetta has grown quite a lot. It seats 3 with proper headrests so that you don't break your neck if you get into mild rear end collision. And it does have heated rear seats, although no vents or USB or anything, which obviously the 82 wouldn't have. But missing on this one, we do have, though, 4 power windows, which the 82 Jetta definitely didn't have. All right, driving this first generation Jetta, it's amazing how small this car is. I could reach over and touch the other side without having to lean, which is pretty wild. Let me adjust my mirror with this little nub. Okay, all set. Got the Volkswagen key in the ignition. Dummy lights on. Fires right up. Check that out. No power steering. You probably don't need it once we're moving. And I'm told the AC does work in this car. Let me fire that up. Oh, wow. That whole engine just bogged down as soon as I clicked that AC on. But what a cool thing that the AC actually works. That's really neat. All right, so I'm going to go from park into drive there on the automatic transmission shifter. And let's see what this little guy drives like. That horn is awesome. Now, this is from the era where turning the AC on has a real implication on whether or not you're going to make it up the hill or not. So if we have any sudden mountains here outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan, might need to go ahead and turn that AC down a little bit. But, I mean, first impressions are the car vibrates like crazy at idle, which was just kind of part of the gig back in the early 1980s, but the actual inside doesn't seem to rattle hardly at all. Even on this graveled parking area I'm driving through, the car is remarkably tight and it's remarkably roomy. I mean, the amazing thing that we've lost in modern cars is the ability to make a small car with a huge interior. And part of the reason we've lost that ability is because cars now have to be able to keep the passengers alive in the event it rolls over. Where back in the day, having an A-pillar that was 2 inches wide, it was fine. People were more expendable back then. All right, onto the throttle, or what is there of the throttle. No idea what that RPM is, but that transmission, that torque converter, oh, buttery smooth, so smooth. Look, they called these transmission slush boxes back in the day for a reason. In modern cars, automatics, I think without exception, are not only faster, but get better fuel economy than their manual counterparts, if they have manual counterparts. Back in 82, it was quite the opposite. This car would have had a 5-speed manual, and I think this is a 3-speed auto. So you just have a lot fewer ratios, plus the inefficiencies that come along with that transmission mean that they were quite a bit slower and less fuel efficient than their manual cousins. Brakes feel really good. You know how rare it is to drive one of these cars that is just not completely clapped out? There's that legendary idle shake that so many of these cars had even when new. All right, engine is nice and warm, so I'm just driving it full throttle. That's probably 20 miles an hour. That's maybe 35 indicated, but probably closer to 30. I'm told the speedometer is about 5 to 10 miles an hour off. 180,000 miles on this car. And yes, it's been restored, but look, tight as an absolute drum. What a beautiful little car to be able to cruise around in. Ride! Look, most cars that I've driven from this era, very softly sprung. This car actually feels very modern in the ride quality. It's not that soft. I'm sure part of that is down to its German heritage, right? Still intended to take turns fast on an Autobahn. But yeah, ride's got some precision to it, which I wasn't expecting. And just the ability to see with millimeter precision all four corners of this car is such a rarity in 2024. I mean, all I do now is drive kind of overinflated, over blob stuffed crossovers. So it's so cool to be like, oh, the front end is where the front end is, right? There's not some, okay, the front end is where the front end is plus 12 inches of crash bumper, but there's not some like weird hood shape that I'm trying to look around or some fake hood scoop I'm trying to navigate. That's really cool. Yeah, that whole car shakes pretty bad at idle and then smooths out instantly once you get on the throttle. This was such an interesting era for Volkswagen, the late 70s to the early 80s, because they were trying to come up with their future beyond just the Type 1 Volkswagen Beetle and, of course, the bus. And it really was a big transition for the brand. Like, all you've been making for 40 plus years is the same car, and then you ditch the rear engine, rear drive, air-cooled thing to go to a front-wheel drive, front-engine, water-cooled thing. I mean, that's a big transition, but kudos to the engineers. They did so brilliantly. It's amazing that these early Volkswagens, be it the Rabbits or the Golfs or the Jettas, or the Quantums or the Scirocco's, the Mark 1s, they're just fantastic. They were able to replace the Beetle with something better that still sold in the millions. That's amazing. Okay, I'm going to go left here. Let's see how the handling is. Taking this turn at a blistering 18 miles an hour. Oh, the steering is so heavy. Oh, I said that it would probably get lighter at speed. It does, but not by a lot. It's heavy, but there's not a whole lot of communication coming through it, which I'm a little bit surprised about. Yeah, you can feel what the road is doing right at center, but it weights up to the point where you're not really paying attention to variances and pebbles when you're making turns, because that is one heck of heavy steering. That's pretty surprising. I'm getting nice and cold by this AC here. Let me turn it off. Let's see if that changes the way this car idles. A little bit. And the performance is noticeably better. That's amazing. How much horsepower that compressor saps. When you turn it off, it's like you're driving, how do you go from a Jetta to a Jetta GLI in the 80s? You just turn off the AC. That's the difference that it makes. Wow. Brakes are really good. Progressive, not grabby. I don't know ABS, I don't believe, in this car, but doesn't need it. Full stop. Onto the throttle. Super quiet engine. Look, I wouldn't say that the engine has a lot of character. The Type 1 air-cooled flat 4 really had a lot of personality. This 1.7 is fine. It does the trick. I think it's an 8-valve unit, but it's not particularly revvy or excited to kind of burst on the scene with character, but it does the job. Look, this is not, I'm not going to say that this is an early Rabbit GTI, with multi-valves and a high rev line. This is kind of your run-of-the-mill Jetta back in the day, so you can't really expect it to be that fun or that exciting. Let's see what it's like when we rev it out. Speed limit up here is 45. I'm still doing well under the speed limit. Come on, car. All right, yeah, it's fine. It accelerates like it's supposed to. I think my big takeaways are just how approachable and in some ways better this 80s Jetta is than a lot of modern cars. Just the visibility alone makes this car worth the price of admission. Being able to see everything around you. So many modern cars, you're like, why am I in a pit? Look, why am I just looking at black dash and screens when I should be enjoying the world on the outside? And that's what this car does. That windshield perfectly frames your surroundings, and it makes you appreciate where you are. Where modern cars, with screen after screen after screen, spend so much time trying to take you out of the real world and put you in a virtual one. It's so refreshing to be in a car that does the polar opposite. All right, enough about the Mark 1. I think we've seen enough about the early Jetta. Let's go ahead and transition to the new one. All right, driving the new Volkswagen, foot on brake, push the start button. Well, it certainly vibrates not at all. That's a pretty big difference compared to the old one. Now let's start with talking about the subject everybody loves to moan about in 2024, and that's how much more expensive new cars are than old cars. And if you look at the straight up numbers, there's no doubting that. So this new Jetta starts at just a tick under $22,000, which, by the way, if you compare automatic to automatic, is slightly less than the outgoing version. However, the old Jetta was $8,000 or thereabouts. As spec, that one may have been closer to like 85, 8,700 with some options. However, if you adjust for inflation, which is quite a big adjustment because $1 back then is worth something like $3.26 today, that old Jetta would have been knocking on 30 grand in today's money. It started in like the 26, 27 territory, 30 grand. This one as configured is $30,680. And for that, you get adaptive cruise control and ventilated seats and heated seats and automatic climate control and 2 screens and airbags and safety feature after safety feature after safety feature. So, which one is better value? Well, drop me a comment below. But what's it like driving the new Jetta? It is a lot bigger and a lot heavier, about 18, 20 inches longer, as we talked about, and we're knocking on the door of 1,000 pounds heavier. The old car about 1,800, this new car about 2,800, maybe 3,000 as spec with some of the goodies. So it drives very differently. It's a lot quieter, it's a lot smoother, feels a lot bigger though. I don't have that same sense of visibility or depth perception as where the corners are. I have to rely on stuff in some cases like backup cameras because I just don't have as well of a sense as where the tail is on this car. Having said that though, it's a lot more comfortable, it's a lot more quiet, and it is shocking in terms of acceleration, the difference between these two. I mean, we are talking double the horsepower, and it feels a little bit of turbo lag, just a hint as that 1.5 spools up that teeny tiny turbo, and then that 8-speed is quick to respond. You're never in this 80s lag where the engine is trying to catch up with your demand. It's just simply there, and it simply goes and accelerates. It's just a nicer car. I mean, it's tough to really compare them. I think the Jetta the old one is more fun to drive in the sense that what we do nowadays is drive new cars in this job, which I'm very grateful for, but most new cars feel very similar to other new cars in the same segment, where the Jetta from the old days is a different experience, right? It's not something I'm used to with manual steering and tiny tires and that 74 horsepower. But objectively, this new one drives better in every single way. All the folks that are like, they don't make them like they used to, that might be true to some extent, but it's also true in an extent that I wouldn't want to get into any kind of collision in the old one, and this new one I would feel much more comfortable in. It's a nice car, this Jetta. And look, if you compare the cars of today against their competition compared to the cars of the old days against their competition, the competition is a lot tighter today. You know, in the 80s, you had some pretty dreary cars that Jetta was competing against, like an Escort, like a Chevette or a Citation, or something in that territory, like the Plymouths and the teeny tiny Pontiacs and the Sundances and the Imperials of the world. Oh God, the K cars. And the Jetta was so much better than a K car. It was so much better than an Escort. I mean, I'm just going to say that now. You can fight me with that in the comments, but the car was better made, it handled better, and it was just leagues and bounds above anything domestic. Now, if you compare it to some of the Japanese competition, right, well, then it gets a little tighter, but compared to the domestics, it was way better. What's crazy is nowadays in 2024, the domestics have completely left this class. The Ford Focus is gone, the Dodge Dart is gone, the Chevy Cruze is gone. So all this car has to compete with now are the Japanese, the Honda Civics of the world, the Mazda 3s of the world, and the Nissan Sentras of the world, and now the Koreans, which wasn't necessarily a point of competition in the 1980s. I mean, yes, Hyundai was introducing some stuff which was worse than walking, but nowadays you've got cars like the Kia Forte and the Hyundai Elantra, which are genuinely excellent vehicles. So this car not only has to compete with Japanese models, but now Korean models and no American models. So they have been forced out of the market, or they left the market, and not much missed, if we're being honest. So the competition now is much tighter, and let's be honest, the competition also offers some technology that the new Jetta doesn't have, like hybridization, like all-wheel drive in some cases. This Jetta only available with that Turbo 4 front-wheel drive and an automatic. Although this car does have a GLI option, which has the manual trans, which is a ton of fun. But look, it's tough out there. It's tough, and I think where the Jetta shines now is this feels like the premium option, the baby Audi, if you will, in that lineup. And I think that's well-deserved. It's well-equipped, it's comfortable, and it drives great. But is it leagues above the competition like the old one? No, because the competition has gotten a lot tighter. What's cool about this story, folks, is yes, the Jetta's gotten bigger and more powerful, and there's a lot more features in here, but it's still stuck to its original DNA. A transverse-mounted 4-cylinder engine feeding the front wheels and a pretty decent starting price. That means this car is good value, just as the original one was over 40 years ago. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. A huge thank you to Volkswagen for inviting me out to Ann Arbor to make this video possible, and we'll see you in the next one.